Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today is Kaila Maguire of the Parental podcast. Hello, Kaila. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's very refreshing to be the guest instead of the host.
And you are the host of the Parental podcast. Can you tell folks a little bit about what that is, how it happened, and why you're doing it?
Yeah, so the podcast is almost 2 years old. It's a little younger than my son, and that's because my son was, I guess, one of the main reasons why I started the podcast. After going through my first pregnancy, which then also turned into a pandemic pregnancy during that last trimester, and then giving birth, throughout the whole process, I was just really shocked at all of the things that I was experiencing or feeling or thinking that no one had prepared me for. I think we're led to believe that pregnancy is like this super easy, rosy time, and birth is kind of the same experience. It's almost like a no-brainer. And if you've given birth, you're definitely laughing right now because you know that it's the exact opposite. If you're a parent, you know that it's the exact opposite. So I basically just wanted to bring to light some of the topics that we don't talk about often enough in the mainstream, or even just in light, friendly conversation, in order to normalize the not so talked about topics and maybe the tougher topics, and just have more people be more prepared. And even if you're not a parent, just to normalize pregnancy, normalize birth, and recognizing that it's this amazing, powerful thing. And it's not supposed to be easy. And it's okay if you're not having an easy time. So that's what Parental is. We talk about pregnancy, birth, postpartum, parenting in general, surviving, raising a human being, which is just like this mind-blowing thing that we've decided to do. And that's what I do. I used to be a kindergarten teacher, and I stopped doing that right in time to have my son. And then basically the podcast was my second child, born about 6 months after my son.
I think that's a very important element, that I'm not speaking of all the parenting blogs and all the parenting podcasts out there, but there is that one slice of it that's it's going to be so easy and empowering. And if it's hard for you in any way, that means you're a terrible, terrible parent. If you have to use formula instead of breastfeeding, you have failed as a mother.
Right.
You know what? This hurts too much. I'm going to use some drugs. You have failed as. There's a huge underlying stream, sometimes overlying.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I'm glad that you're addressing these questions very honestly, saying, no, let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah. And I also think that after having given birth, I am so much more careful with like what I give my energy to. And that also means I don't have the energy for bullshit. Sorry, can I curse?
Our attitude on the show is, don't be afraid of the F word. You did it once. You're a parent. Don't be
That's
afraid
a good point.
Clean it off at least one human being. So let's.
That's very true. And I, as a kindergarten teacher, I was used to censoring myself Monday through Friday from about 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I am used to my home being my space where I can just let her rip. So yeah, I really, after having given birth and being a parent now, you realize that there are so many other things that just don't fucking matter. And I think part of the reason why I started the podcast is because I just wanted to cut to the chase and talk about the things that actually matter, talk about what you really should be worried about, or what you really should be planning for when you're getting ready to give birth. And it's like, not the cute, like mommy and me swaddle and robe, like that shit doesn't matter. Like, that's for Instagram. That's great. And if you're into that, more power to you. But what you really should be concerned with is, do you have any food in your fridge to come home to after you've just given birth to a baby? Just really talking about like the everyday details that I guess naturally get lost, especially in a culture that really tries to glamorize, I guess, the more glamorous parts of pregnancy, and birth and parenting.
I'm glad you mentioned the fridge. In my family, for a very long time, the tradition is if somebody's pregnant, we're giving them about 10 gallons of various kinds of frozen soup. Because that's not going to have the energy to cook. And so those little details that the many people in the mommy blogosphere don't mention that part, or they've got Blue Apron and a private chef because
Exactly. Yeah. And then you're left sitting there and you have no energy to cook, and neither does your spouse. And you don't even have the energy to brush your teeth some days. And it can feel really jarring if you didn't know that you were going to feel that way, or if you didn't know that that could very well be your reality. And for us, aside from the fact that, no one was coming over our house because of the pandemic anyway, it was very jarring to just, kind of be like, wait, I just had a baby. I've never done this before. Not only was it my son's birthday, it was my birthday. I just became a mother and I'm not used to this. And it's such a transitional period. I feel like I'm still like 2 years in, I'm still like learning along with him. And I think that's something that we are starting to talk about more. And it's something that I focus a lot on the podcast.
And can we also just admit that as much as we adore them, especially the newborn to early toddler phase, they're beautiful and wonderful and the best decision we ever made. And they're also really boring for many hours on end.
I have always been like, ever since I was a teenager, I was always like a firm 6 months and up kind of gal. I have a whole episode about how I'm not a baby person. And my talk with my guest, who is my friend, and she's also not a baby person, and she has had a baby. And we talk about the shame that can come with that, because you're looked at, some people might go as far as to like question your femininity, because of course I'm supposed to love babies just because I have the parts to make them. And we talked about how it's really like, it's not fun. It's like a potato that is just like sleeping, eating, and pooping. And it's okay to not enjoy that. It's okay. Some people love the newborn stage. Some people love the toddler stage, and other people don't. And that's okay. That's, I think, like the main message behind that episode is that like, it's okay to not love the things that you think you're supposed to love, because everybody, at least out loud, says they love these things.
Yeah, there's going to be different stages that you love more than others. So my
Exactly.
oldest, my youngest is 12. I didn't choke the oldest one between 14 and 20. It wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
Easier and better than others. And that perceived pressure to just love every second of it. These are the magic years. Don't you just love that? I miss when mine was. It's like, I'm not sure how much I miss the years when they were basically very expensive pets you go to jail for leaving home alone.
Right. Where their every waking need and want and their very survival depends on you. It's a lot of pressure. And I think it is, it is really hard when older generations or other parents say like, oh my gosh, like, aren't you having like the best time ever? Like, oh my gosh, those newborn snuggles, because it does automatically, if you're not feeling that way, it automatically invalidates how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And it's told you, okay, well, I guess I can't really talk to this person about how I'm feeling. And everybody should be able to talk about how they're feeling, regardless of whether it's a, quote, normal or accepted feeling or not. And I think that is like why on the podcast, we talk a lot about being just aware of what you're saying and how everybody's experience is different, and also how you're phrasing things to people, because everybody's pregnancy experience is different. Everybody's birth experience is different. Like everybody's journey to parenthood is different. And you just truly never know what someone is going through or how they feel. So instead of like throwing these blanket, like just stereotypical comments out there, like sleep when the baby sleeps, and just like nothing enrages me more. Like, yeah, pay the bills when the baby pays the bills too. Cool. Great. Yeah. I think we talk a lot about kind of just leading with curiosity instead of judgment, and learning how to listen more instead of talking, and leading with empathy. And that's how we can truly support any parent, whether you're a brand new parent, you had your kid yesterday, or you have an 18-year-old.
And I like what you're doing there is from a safety perspective. We've spoken with a lot of experts on the mental health of the child, but the mental health of the parent is so important. And that's one of the things I think that you address very directly. and even to the point of admitting that the parents have mental health needs as well, which isn't
Absolutely.
we always really fully buy into.
Exactly. And I think I just saw something on Instagram and I loved it. At first, I didn't understand it at first glance. It was a reel because, of course, these days, if anybody who's anybody is posting reels on Instagram, but it said it's not a shortage of therapists. It's an outburst of millennials working to break generational cycles. And that hit me so hard because I talk so much about your mental health as a human being, your mental health when it comes to parenting, when it comes to motherhood or fatherhood, and how you have to confront it in order to work hard and raise a child who maybe needs less therapy than you do as a grown-up. I always tell people that's my number one goal. If my son, his name is Robin, if Robin needs less therapy than I do, I did a great job. We're like, my husband and I are killing it. And I think it's really important to keep talking about parental mental health, especially in the last 2 years. I mean, like the statistics are really, really bad, especially for parents of children under the age of 5. I mean, the rates for postpartum anxiety, the rates for postpartum depression have like tripled in the last 2 years, and understandably so, but it has to be something, unfortunately, understandably so, but it has to be something that we continue to talk about, because you truly can't raise someone else until you are working on reparenting yourself or raising yourself and giving yourself the healing that you need. Like you can't, I don't want to use, it's such a rough phrase, but broken can't fix broken.
Yeah.
And not that you're broken. None of us are broken, but you have to make the
Or all of
conscious
us broken.
choice.
Either way.
Yes. Yep. Either way. Definitely both works.
If everybody's broken, nobody's broken. That's how the saying
That's
goes, right?
true. That's a good point. But it's making the conscious choice every day to work on yourself, to kind of give your kid the love that you needed as a kid, or the love that you deserved as a kid if you felt like you didn't receive that. And that's another thing that's like really hard to confront. I think another thing that a lot of people don't talk about is how once you become a parent, especially if you're, if you dealt with childhood trauma in your life, or if you have complex family dynamics in your life, when you become a parent, a lot of repressed memories can come to the surface, and things that you didn't even know you remembered from your childhood. And it's really important to kind of sit with it. This is why I'm such a fan of talk therapy personally, but to sit with it and just kind of figure out what happened there. Because I just read this too, that a lot of times if you as a parent are really struggling with a certain age that your child is, or a certain like age group, like for me, the beginning of toddlerhood was very rough for me. And I know a lot of people also have a really hard time with like 11, 12, 13 age group, because they're just branching out. But the theory is that you struggle the most with the age that you struggled. So if you had a really hard time, or something happened to you when you were 10 or 11 or 12, when your child is 10 or 11 or 12, subconsciously you have a very hard time, because you're seeing yourself again in a way. And so it's just really, I mean, I could talk about this all day, every day, but it's just really important to kind of take a look at what your childhood was like and what you want to bring to the table. Because everybody has things that we want to repeat from our childhood. And then probably everybody else has things that you don't want to repeat, but you have to at least just be aware of it first. Awareness is like just the number one step. And for me, talk therapy has brought so much self-awareness to my life, which I can then use to make myself a better parent.
It's an excellent tool. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like how you kind of encapsulated about raising kids who need less therapy than we do.
Yes.
Puts me in mind of an old adage from a much less first world approach to the same thing about, my father was a soldier so I could be a farmer, so my son could be an artist. Same vibe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Exact same vibe.
Yeah. So on this topic of mental health, I think one of the things that happens with a lot of parents is we do get blindsided, whether it's by, oh, this isn't working out at all the way that I read on Instagram, or that you're dealing with these emotions and memories that are popping up you haven't thought about in years, or you're talking to your teenager and suddenly the script you hated your mom for comes bursting out of your mouth from somewhere. The thing you never ever say. Or those kind of blindsides, which is where a lot of it can get caught up and start either getting into some kind of mental self-talk spiral, or as we're older, make a big tactical mistake in our communication with our teens.
Yeah.
Either from your own experience so far or from the guests you've talked to, what have been some of the big, like, repeating blind spots that you've seen?
I think I've had a few guests who have older kids, whether like teenagers or early 20s, and they always end up talking about the importance of letting their kid fail and how that plays into our ego as parents, and how it is so hard to not see your kid's failure as a failure on your parenting. And I was talking with, her name is Lisa Sugarman, and we were talking about how her daughter wasn't enjoying her college major and she kind of wanted to drop out. And she knew logically she should kind of talk her daughter through it and encourage her to stay in. But she also knew that what she would have wanted from her parent at that age was support. Okay, so what if you drop out? So what do you like? I will, like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the options. So I think that's one of the biggest things that, especially in the past, I feel like I'm always shit talking the last generation, like boomer generation, but whatever, is that they were very afraid of how we were a representation of them, and they didn't want to look bad. And so a lot of parents pushed their dreams, their goals onto their kids. And that led to lack of communication or poor communication with their kids because their kid didn't feel heard. I was kind of like middle of the road. So I obviously don't have a teenager, so I can't speak to this yet from a parent perspective, but I was kind of middle of the road where my mom was a better listener. My dad was more of he definitely, looking back on it, like, he took it to heart if we quote failed, or if we were doing something that he felt reflected on him poorly as a parent. And so I've talked a lot with other parents about how that is all ego, and it's so hard it's natural, but that's why it's so hard to work past that and realize that your kid is not a carbon copy of you. They are allowed to make their own mistakes. They should make their own mistakes. And it doesn't mean that you're failing as a parent. I think that's one of the most common themes of moving past your ego, letting your kid fail, and also realizing that it's not your fault. And of course, you feel like it's your fault because you care. It's your kid. But it's also a little bit of, you feel like you are doing a shitty job as a parent, and no one wants to feel that way. Yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing.
And I think we also see that when in the very early ages too, with what's the benchmark for pulling yourself up to upright? And what's the benchmark for your first word? And when should they start reading? And I think that's that same kind of, is this a sign I'm a bad parent?
Yes.
Is very common. And just kind of relaxing into it is usually the better. I think that's one of the themes of your podcast, and just good advice in general about, take a breath. Every bit of energy you're spending wondering whether you're a good parent is energy you could be spending towards being a good parent.
Yeah. And I especially, like, being a former kindergarten teacher, I was confronted with those type of questions all the time from parents. And, well, what level are they supposed to be on? And it took me a while to realize, just because I was young, it took me a while to realize that?
On 1 second, this might be.
Yeah. Yeah, go.
Hello. Mm-hmm. You can in about a half an hour. I'm actually recording an episode right now. Okay, no problem. Bye. Just not an emergency, just a request for tech support from my aunt and my grandmother.
Oh my gosh. I know those calls very well.
We're very fortunate. My aunt actually lives in the house here with us, and my grandmother's in a retirement community literally across the street.
Oh wow.
We get to have when we have a family gathering, it's pretty sprawling, and it's nice that our kids get to have the multiple generations in their lives.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that.
It was great during COVID because my brother was also in a room here, so the kids had a lot of adults to give them attention.
Yes, you could just spread it out. Everyone does shifts.
Yeah, exactly. It was very helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were talking about the importance of just relaxing and not letting the shoulder devil saying how bad a parent you are.
Yes. And it's so easy. I mean, mom guilt and just like parental guilt is a beast.
Yeah.
I mean, a beast. And it's very hard to kind of talk yourself down from that. And I feel like it's a constant work in progress. Like I'm sure there's not a single parent out there that can't tell me that they don't feel guilty at some point, like during the week, no matter how old your kid is. Yeah. But you have to just push through. And also just remember that your child is not like, there's no predetermined path.
Yeah.
Truly. Like let them go down their own path. And I hadn't heard about this until a couple months ago. I knew helicopter parenting, but apparently there's also lawnmower parenting. Have you heard about that?
No.
So I actually think this is more relevant than helicopter parenting. Mm-hmm. So a push lawnmower. Mm-hmm. So you're pushing the lawnmower and your kid's behind you because you're paving an easy, smooth, perfect path for them. And it's so tempting to do that. And because you care, and it's hard to watch your kids struggle. And I think that is where a lot of the like, well, what level are they supposed to be on? And you're supposed to go to college. Everyone goes to college. I think that's where a lot of that comes from. It's because you know that, potentially the other options might lead to them struggling. And we don't want to see our kids struggle, but they have to.
That's how you become a successful adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Letting them screw up in ways that hurt when they can come home and get a hot meal and good advice rather than when they're 23 and just finishing college on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's I can't remember because we had that little interruption there what brought it to mind, but the idea of, pushing your kids into your same mold. I know one of the challenges that I had was not really push my kid into the same mold, but I feel my parents did a great job. I have no real resentments towards my parents, but one thing that didn't happen in the school system at the time with my parents' parenting was really helping me understand how I could take interest and turn them into an adult living. It just hands off very well, you're probably go to college, you'll probably be a teacher, you're probably, there's like 4 careers that you see as a child. So I'd lean into that where my oldest was the victim of this and I'm trying to do better with my youngest. Well, I kind of like cooking. All right, here's the plan. You're going to be the best damn cook that there ever was. And I'm going to get you in touch with this cousin who runs a restaurant in Canada. And we're going to get you in these culinary classes. And my buddy's going to get you a job in the kitchen. He's like, whoa. Hey, I said I kind of like cooking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I watched one episode of Kitchen Nightmares, okay?
Yeah, exactly. And I would keep doing that. And eventually he'd just, dude, settle down. But that kind of thing, and that could lead into lawnmower parenting, where you're not only kind of just creating this idea, but also then greasing the skids as much as possible and slack.
Yeah. And you're doing it because you care.
Yeah.
But it's in the long run, it's not going to be beneficial for them. Yeah.
And even at those younger ages, about letting them fall on their butt.
Yep, exactly. I talked to Andy about that in my podcast episode this past week. And I think as a
Mhm.
teacher, I already had a lot of experience with
Mhm.
that. So with my son, it's obviously harder because he's my kid. So it
Yeah.
is like a little more heartbreaking to watch it happen or to know like, yep, he's not going to make that step. That's going to be a fall. But you have to do it. You have, and you, it's just such a, to be such a teacher. It's such a teachable moment. And it's just all about for younger kids. I think it's a lot of like cause and effect, like gross motor. But then as you get older, it's way more cognitive and thinking about scenarios and then being able to be proactive instead of reactive.
Now, I remember very clearly my youngest when he was just under 1 year old, and at the time in the house we had a hearth for the fireplace. It was about 6 inches off the ground. He got under there and tried to stand up and bumped his little head, not hard, just kind of annoyingly, and then tried again, and I was sitting there wondering, okay, at what point do I drag him out so he doesn't get head trauma?
Yeah, like
Let him figure this one out on his own. That when he does that down there, it's going to sting a little, and
yep.
and it's kind of a comedic example, but I think we have that, especially with younger ones, that push and pull of safety versus permission to explore versus
Yeah.
permission to make mistakes.
Exactly. And you're always, and each scenario is different. So you're always kind of just that's exactly what it is. You're kind of just taking a step back and you're watching in the teacher world, especially the early childhood world, it's called the zone of proximal development. And it's just
Mm,
this invisible bubble that exists between you and the child. And you can make the bubble smaller if
mhm.
you see that they're needing help or if they ask you for help. But a lot of times you are working on creating a bigger and bigger bubble as they foster their own independence and learn their own limits and their own boundaries. And you're still there. If they turn around, you're still, hey, I'm here if you need me. But
Mhm.
it's all about letting them building confidence in themselves.
No, that's very, very smart.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about your show is your what do you call them? Baby sods.
Yeah.
Far as I can tell, are just people telling stories about the thing they said they would never ever do with a child and how long it took them to go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah. So the baby sets are a lot of fun for me because I record with my husband.
Mm,
So basically I post a question box on the Parental Instagram account every couple weeks or so, and people will submit their answer or their phrase or whatever it is for the week. And then my husband and I will read them. And they're almost always like the most directly relatable things. The last baby sode was all about toddler speak or toddler talk and like what is a word that your kid used to say. So many of them was like, oh yeah, he says fuck for shark, he says fuck for truck. So many of them were just the kid just said fuck. And the one before was yeah, like what did you say you would never do? A
yeah.
lot of it was like eating in the car or screen time in a restaurant. And it's just a time to, it's a like great feedback from the Parental community. And I really have like the nicest listeners. They're just so sweet. And then it's also a time that my husband and I get to kind of just talk to each other. So yeah, I really love the baby sods. It's a nice break kind of from the more serious topics that we sometimes get into on the full episodes.
And I think that's important also in life as a parent, giving yourself that time to. The child can become such an overwhelming priority, and letting levity, letting a little bit of irresponsibility, letting your relationship with their other parent or
Yeah.
parents, however the family constellation is, and
Yeah.
giving that the time it needs as well. That's all very important.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. I like the baby sets a lot. I hope my husband, he definitely indulges me because obviously podcasting is not his thing, it's my thing. But I hope he keeps doing them as long as I keep asking him.
So, Kayla, what in your journey with the podcast so far, what has surprised you the most?
Um like in terms of what I've learned about parenting or what I've heard from other people.
Whatever works for you.
I think what surprised me the most is how much we all have in common,
Mm.
but how much we don't share it.
Mm.
And I mean, that's kind of the whole purpose of the podcast, is to share the things that you are not necessarily feeling comfortable sharing, or maybe the things that you haven't shared in everyday conversation. But it always, I mean, almost every single time, either I say something or my guest says something, and one of us has a direct connection, or we have felt that exact same way before. And it has shown me that, you know, every single parenting style is different. Every parent as an individual and as a parent is different. All kids are different, but there is this kind of overlying similar arc that we all kind of go through. And it is just really nice to kind of know, to kind of find that out, even if, especially if it's your first time being like, oh my God, she felt that way too after she gave birth, or like, wow, their teenager did that too. Cause it just makes you feel less alone. And I think, especially just the way I feel like, you know, the village doesn't really exist for a lot of people anymore. I certainly didn't have a village when I first gave birth. I don't really have one now. I've started to kind of carve one out for myself, you know, digging and scraping, but it has shown me how much we really do need that. Like, people want to feel like they're not alone in experiencing something difficult or in something enraging, you know, like maybe their toddler just does the thing that like it pisses you off so much. And you find someone who's like, oh my God, my toddler does that too. And you're like, fuck, isn't that so annoying? Like, just finding the similarities, because it's so easy to feel like you're the only one, or it's so easy to feel like everyone else is having an easier time than you are, or no one else has experienced this exact same thing I have experienced. And almost every single episode, there is some sort of relatability or similarity.
And that's super important, because I think that question you were embarrassed to ask, or that experience that you're afraid to bring up, or that time you screwed up that you're ashamed to admit, those are the places where the real danger is. Where, especially in early childhood with postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, where those early symptoms are thoughts that a lot of people might not. I don't mean to actually go like that. That was not the most sensitive thing I've ever done. But those thoughts spinning around in your head, the symptoms are so, they feel so horrible that I think a lot of people don't get the help they need because they're ashamed to bring them up, even though a lot of women and men have those feelings.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, again, that's why we keep talking about this stuff. That's why I will never not talk to someone about like parental mental health, maternal mental health, paternal mental health, because I think that is a huge reason why a lot of us will feel alone or feel like we can't say anything. It's just because we're just not talking about it yet. And the more we keep talking about it, and the more people that keep talking about it, it'll become less shameful. You know, like the stigma and the shame will gradually kind of disappear. I kind of feel like in general, that's what's, at least like in my sphere, in my world, that's kind of what's happening for a lot of people with therapy. I'd like just use that as an example. 10 years ago, people weren't walking around telling people that they were in therapy.
Yeah.
It was this shameful thing, or you only told one person and you were very embarrassed about it. Now, I was just having this conversation with one of my best friends, and we were both talking about our therapist and how at this point it's like, wait, you're not in therapy? Like, it's almost just like reversed, and it takes time. But I think just the more we talk about these things, the less shocking they will be to everyone. They will be more accepted and normalized. And it's really all about getting parents to feel more supported, less alone, because raising children is so, like, let's be clear, it is so fucking hard that it's like easily it's the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, and also the best thing I've ever done in my life at the same time. And dealing with both of those simultaneously can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, it's extremely hard with infinite stakes.
Yes.
and you're making it up as you go along.
Yeah. Yes,
That's
truly.
job.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for for coming on the show, and also for having this podcast where people can really honestly discuss these things. Or if
Yeah.
you're not ready to do that, listen to other people discuss them. Because I think that's
Exactly.
a way to having those conversations your own selves.
Exactly.
And before I let you go, what's the really smart question I should have asked you but didn't?
Oh my God. I don't know. A really smart question that you should have asked me. Oh my God. Maybe something to do with what I don't know. I'm starting I have birth classes on my brain because I am starting my own birth class.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it's called Not Your Mama's Birth Class. And I had all of my birth classes canceled because of the pandemic naturally. And it was that in between time where nothing was virtual because we were all just in this pure panic mode. So it was just canceled. Best of luck to you. God bless. So I never got to experience a birth class. And so I decided to become a certified birth educator and just start my own and provide all of this resources and wealth of knowledge and discussion to people who are either becoming a parent for the first time or for the third time. So I guess my brain immediately goes to that. And I guess maybe the smart question would have been, why do those classes still matter? Because I mean, everything's Googleable. It's the 21st century, like follow a bunch of Instagram accounts, right? So, and I think that's a lot of people unfortunately feel that way. Like, oh, this is like so old fashioned. Birth classes don't matter. Like it's stupid. I can just look it all up myself. But it's really that sense of community and that sense of you're not alone, that feeling of community, trying to get that started before your baby is born, because you need that sense of community before your baby is born. So I guess, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. That's great. Just setting it up ahead of time. The time to think about these things is not on the way home from the hospital.
No, it is 5 months prior to that.
Ideally, like about this time you start trying.
Yes, basically.
Well, thank you so much, Kaila, for coming on today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.